Hi.
I will tell you a story about my friend's relationships and cheating of his wife. Elliot's life with Mara had always seemed idyllic from the outside. Their story was one that their friends often envied and admired. A romance that had blossomed in the cozy corners of a university library, where she had teased him about his meticulous note-taking, and he had marveled at her effortless charm. It wasn't long before their connection deepened, moving from whispered conversations among shelves of dusty books to shared dreams about the future. They married soon after graduation, celebrating their union with an intimate ceremony in a sunlit garden. For years, their marriage had been a testament to teamwork and companionship. Mara pursued her career as a freelance graphic designer, her creativity evident in every project she undertook, while Elliot's steady rise in the finance industry provided them with a stable foundation. They complemented each other's strengths and softened each other's flaws. Together, they created a life that seemed both balanced and fulfilling. Their home reflected this harmony. Bright, inviting, and filled with small details that spoke of their shared history. Photos from vacations, shelves lined with books they'd recommended to one another, and a small garden that Mara tended with care. However, as years turned into a decade, subtle shifts began to appear beneath the polished veneer of their relationship. Elliot was often engrossed in his demanding job, leaving Mara to spend more time alone. While he took pride in providing for their future, he started noticing that their conversations had grown shorter, their evenings quieter. Mara's laughter, once so frequent, seemed more restrained now. She spent more time with her work and less time engaging in the little rituals they used to enjoy together, like sharing coffee on the porch or reading aloud passages from their favorite novels. Elliot rationalized these changes as the natural evolution of a long-term relationship. He told himself that life simply got busy, and they were no exception to the rule. He believed that their love, built on years of trust and understanding, would withstand the pressures of routine and time. However, a lingering unease began to settle in his chest, one he could not quite articulate. It was not yet suspicion, but rather the faint whisper of something unspoken between them, a distance that seemed to grow despite their shared space. Mara, meanwhile, had been grappling with her own internal struggles. Her creative pursuits, once a source of joy and inspiration, had begun to feel like a monotonous grind. Projects that had once excited her now left her drained, and she found herself seeking distractions to fill the void. She started attending more events alone, reconnecting with old acquaintances and forming new connections that sparked a sense of vitality she hadn't felt in years. At first, it was innocent enough. Gallery openings, networking events, and coffee dates with other designers. But these moments of escape from the monotony of her routine slowly became something she looked forward to more than her time at home. Elliot began noticing small but significant changes in Mara's behavior. She seemed more preoccupied, her phone always close at hand and her responses to his questions often vague. Her wardrobe, which had once been a mix of casual and creative, now included outfits that felt more deliberate and polished. When he asked about her plans for the evening or her sudden interest in attending so many events, she would offer explanations that sounded reasonable but left him feeling unconvinced. Her energy, though vibrant, seemed directed elsewhere, away from their shared life. Despite these changes, Elliot's trust in Mara remained intact. He loved her deeply and could not imagine her being unfaithful. Yet, he could not shake the growing sense that he was losing touch with the woman he had built his life with. It wasn't just her physical presence that felt distant. It was her emotional availability. Her laughter no longer seemed as spontaneous, her expressions more guarded. Even in moments of intimacy, Elliot felt as though there was a barrier he could not penetrate, a part of Mara that was now hidden from him. Mara's behavior also began to affect their social life. Invitations to dinners and gatherings were often met with hesitance or outright refusal from her, leaving Elliot to attend alone. Their friends began to notice her absence and asked if everything was all right. Elliot would reassure them, offering explanations that felt more like excuses. Mara was busy with work, feeling under the weather, or simply needed a night to herself. Yet each of these excuses only deepened the chasm between them. The couple's evenings together became routine and predictable. They would share a meal, often in silence, and retreat to their respective corners of the house. Elliot to his office to catch up on emails, and Mara to her studio to sketch or browse through her tablet. The shared laughter and companionship that once defined their relationship felt like distant memories. It was as though they were living parallel lives, intersecting briefly but never truly converging. Elliot began to question his own role in their drifting apart. He wondered if his demanding career had made him inattentive to Mara's needs, if he had failed to notice her growing discontent. He resolved to make more time for her, to rekindle the spark that had once burned so brightly between them. He started planning small gestures, flowers delivered to her studio, surprise date nights, and weekend getaways. But these efforts often fell flat. Mara appreciated them but remained distant, her mind seemingly elsewhere. It was during one of these attempts to reconnect that Elliot first felt a true pang of doubt. They had planned a weekend at a cabin in the mountains, a chance to escape the noise of their everyday lives and focus on each other. Mara had seemed excited at first, but as the weekend approached, she grew hesitant, citing a work project that demanded her attention. Elliot went alone, spending the weekend surrounded by nature, but consumed by thoughts of their relationship. In the quiet solitude of the cabin, Elliot allowed himself to reflect on the past few months. He began to piece together the small inconsistencies in Mara's behavior, moments that he had dismissed or explained away. The unease that had been simmering beneath the surface now bubbled over, leaving him with a gnawing sense of uncertainty. He realized that he no longer felt secure in their bond, that the foundation of their marriage had begun to crack. By the time Elliot returned home, he was determined to address his concerns head-on. Yet, even as he prepared to have an open and honest conversation with Mara, he couldn't shake the fear of what he might uncover. He clung to the hope that their love, though strained, was strong enough to weather whatever storm they were facing. Little did he know, the storm was already brewing, its clouds dark and heavy, ready to upend the life they had built together. The days following Elliot's quiet weekend away brought no immediate resolution, only more questions. His intention to have an open conversation with Mara faltered in the face of her seeming disinterest. She often appeared preoccupied, her attention diverted to her phone or laptop, her responses curt and dismissive. The words Elliot had rehearsed, an earnest attempt to bridge the growing gap, never found their moment. Elliot's unease grew into a persistent thrum of doubt, accompanied by the troubling realization that his instincts might be pointing toward something deeper. For weeks, he tried to suppress the gnawing suspicion, convincing himself that he was overthinking. Yet, the signs were difficult to ignore. Late-night texts and whispered calls in another room. Meetings and errands that stretched on longer than seemed reasonable. Even small details, like the careful way Mara's phone was always turned face down, began to feel significant. One evening, Elliot came home earlier than expected. The house was quiet, illuminated only by the warm glow of lamps in the living room. Mara's laptop sat open on the kitchen table, but she was nowhere to be seen. Her absence wasn't unusual. She often retreated to her studio or the garden when she needed space to think or work. What caught Elliot's attention, however, was the soft chime of an incoming message from her laptop. Without thinking, he glanced at the screen. The notification that appeared at the corner bore a name he didn't recognize. The message was casual on the surface but carried an air of familiarity that felt misplaced. He hesitated, torn between respecting Mara's privacy and the growing need to understand the changes in their relationship. After a moment, he stepped away, deciding against opening her messages. But the seed of doubt had been firmly planted. In the days that followed, Elliot found himself more attuned to the subtle shifts in Mara's behavior. Her frequent trips out of the house, her laughter shared with someone over the phone, and her vague explanations when he asked where she had been. All of it added to a mounting pile of questions. He began noticing patterns. Certain evenings when she dressed with more care, meetings that always seemed to involve the same location, and a new tendency to guard her phone with an intensity he'd never seen before. One afternoon, Elliot decided to approach the situation directly. He waited until Mara had gone out and then searched for answers. It wasn't a decision he made lightly, but the weight of uncertainty had become unbearable. He started with her laptop, scrolling through messages and emails. Most of what he found was ordinary communications with clients, updates from friends. But within her text history, there were gaps, stretches of time where conversations seemed to have been deleted. The absence of evidence felt as telling as its presence. Elliot's unease deepened, a quiet storm brewing in his chest. He shifted his attention to her phone, which she had inadvertently left charging in the kitchen. As he navigated through her messages, he found more missing pieces, conversations that started and ended abruptly. Then, tucked within a messaging app he rarely saw her use, he stumbled upon a thread that made his stomach drop. The messages were with someone identified only by an initial. The tone of their exchange was unmistakably intimate, the words carrying an emotional weight that went far beyond casual friendship. Though the messages were brief, their implications were undeniable. Inside jokes, shared memories that Elliot wasn't a part of, and subtle references to meetings. It all painted a picture that left little room for doubt. Elliot's hands trembled as he closed the app. The clarity he had sought for weeks now felt like a burden too heavy to bear. He sat at the kitchen table, staring at the phone as if it might offer him an explanation or an escape from the crushing reality. For hours, he remained there, consumed by a storm of emotions. Anger, betrayal, and a profound sense of loss. The woman he loved, the partner he had trusted implicitly, was hiding something from him. He decided to confront her, but his resolve wavered when he heard the sound of her car pulling into the driveway. The sight of Mara walking through the door, her smile bright but her gaze distant, made Elliot's chest tighten. The words he had prepared dissolved before they reached his lips. Instead, he simply watched her move through the room, their interaction painfully ordinary in the face of what he now knew. In the days that followed, Elliot grappled with how to proceed. The evidence he had found felt damning, yet the thought of accusing Mara without understanding the full story felt equally unbearable. He began observing her more closely, noting her movements and interactions. He paid attention to the phone calls she took in hushed tones and the way she avoided meeting his gaze. He also started piecing together the gaps in her schedule, the hours that seemed unaccounted for. Elliot considered seeking advice from someone he trusted, but the thought of sharing his suspicions felt like an admission of failure. He couldn't bear the idea of their friends or family knowing that their seemingly perfect marriage had cracks running through its foundation. Instead, he carried the burden alone, his thoughts churning endlessly as he struggled to reconcile the love he still felt for Mara with the evidence of her deception. His breaking point came on an otherwise unremarkable evening. Mara had told him she was meeting a colleague to discuss a project, a story she had used more than once in recent weeks. As she left the house, Elliot decided to follow her. He told himself it wasn't an act of mistrust but a need for clarity. He needed to see for himself what was happening, to understand the truth that Mara seemed determined to keep hidden. Elliot kept his distance as he trailed her car, his heart pounding with every turn she took. She eventually parked outside a small cafe, where she met a man Elliot didn't recognize. The two greeted each other warmly, their body language suggesting a level of familiarity that went far beyond professional. Elliot watched from his car, his emotions a tangled knot of disbelief and heartbreak. As he sat there, the weight of the situation fully settled over him. The relationship he had cherished, the life he had built with Mara, now felt like a fragile construct built on a foundation of falsehoods. He knew he couldn't avoid the confrontation any longer. The truth, however painful, had to come to light. Elliot's drive home was a blur, his mind racing with questions and scenarios. He felt a strange mixture of grief and determination. While the betrayal cut deeply, he also felt a flicker of resolve. Whatever lay ahead, he was determined to face it with the clarity and dignity that their relationship deserved. Elliot's resolve solidified in the hours after his return from the cafe. He replayed the scene in his mind repeatedly. Mara and the man sitting across from each other, their interaction comfortable and familiar in a way that betrayed their supposed boundaries. Yet even with all he had seen, there remained a sliver of doubt gnawing at the edges of his certainty. Was he misinterpreting what he had witnessed? Was his imagination filling in blanks that reality had left untouched? Still, Elliot knew he could not continue in limbo. Their relationship's fragile peace was a thin veneer stretched over a well of unresolved questions. He spent the next day in a quiet haze, cycling through feelings of betrayal, fear, and anger. By the time evening came, he was prepared to confront Mara, determined to face whatever truth lay beneath her behavior. The opportunity presented itself after dinner, a meal marked by strained silence. Mara sat on the couch, scrolling idly through her phone, while Elliot lingered in the kitchen. His hands trembled as he dried the last of the dishes, steeling himself for the conversation ahead. Finally, he joined her, sitting down across from her in the armchair they had bought together years ago. The room felt unnaturally still, the quiet hum of the refrigerator the only sound breaking the tension. Elliot began cautiously, framing his words with care. He spoke of his concerns, of the distance he had felt growing between them over the past months. He avoided accusations, instead focusing on his feelings of confusion and hurt. As he spoke, Mara's expression shifted from mild curiosity to guarded defensiveness. She set her phone down, her body language stiffening as she crossed her arms over her chest. Mara's initial responses were deflective, her explanations vague and rehearsed. She claimed that her recent behavior was a result of stress from work and a desire for personal space. She assured him that there was nothing to worry about, her tone almost dismissive. Yet her eyes darted away from his, and Elliot could see the cracks forming in her composure. Feeling the weight of her evasion, Elliot pressed further. He mentioned the cafe, the man she had met, and the inconsistencies in her explanations. Mara's reaction was immediate. Her cheeks flushed, and her posture stiffened further. She denied any wrongdoing, her voice rising slightly as she insisted that the meeting had been professional. But Elliot noticed how her hands fidgeted in her lap, betraying her discomfort. As the conversation deepened, Elliot's patience began to waver. The vulnerability he had approached the discussion with gave way to frustration, his voice gaining an edge as he demanded honesty. He spoke of the messages he had seen, the missing conversations, and the secrecy surrounding her recent activities. Mara's defenses faltered under the weight of his words, her protests growing weaker with each passing moment. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Mara admitted to the emotional connection she had formed with the other man. Her words tumbled out in a rush, tinged with guilt and desperation. She described it as something unintentional, a bond that had grown from shared conversations and mutual understanding. She insisted that nothing physical had happened, her eyes pleading with Elliot to believe her. Elliot listened in stunned silence, his mind struggling to process her confession. The betrayal he felt was immense, a deep wound that cut through the foundation of their relationship. Yet beneath the anger and hurt, he also felt a flicker of relief. The truth, no matter how painful, was better than the uncertainty that had consumed him for weeks. The conversation stretched late into the night, alternating between heated arguments and moments of strained calm. Elliot demanded to know why Mara had hidden her feelings, why she hadn't come to him when she felt their connection faltering. Mara struggled to answer, her responses muddled by her own confusion and guilt. She spoke of feeling trapped by the routines of their marriage, of longing for something that made her feel alive and seen. As they talked, Elliot found himself reflecting on his own role in their relationship's breakdown. He thought of the long hours he had spent at work, the moments he had missed while chasing professional success. He realized that he had taken their bond for granted, assuming it would endure without the care and attention it once demanded. While he didn't excuse Mara's actions, he couldn't ignore the part he had played in creating the distance between them. By the time their conversation ended, exhaustion had overtaken them both. Mara retreated to the bedroom, leaving Elliot alone in the living room. He sat in silence, his thoughts a whirlwind of emotions. The weight of what had been revealed pressed heavily on his chest, but so too did a strange sense of clarity. For the first time in weeks, the fog of uncertainty had lifted, leaving behind the raw reality of their situation. The days that followed were marked by an uneasy truce. Elliot and Mara moved through their routines with a tentative politeness, avoiding further confrontation while they each grappled with their own feelings. They agreed to take some time to reflect before deciding how to move forward. For Elliot, this meant reevaluating his priorities and the effort he was willing to invest in repairing their relationship. For Mara, it meant confronting the choices she had made and the reasons behind them. Though the path ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear. Their relationship would never be the same. Whether it could be rebuilt or was destined to crumble entirely remained to be seen. But for now, they were left to navigate the fragile terrain of their shared lives. Each step a careful negotiation between hope and hurt. In the days following their confrontation, Elliot and Mara coexisted in a fragile equilibrium, their home imbued with an unspoken tension. Each room seemed to echo with words left unsaid, every shared glance charged with a mixture of pain, guilt, and uncertainty. They avoided the deeper conversations, instead skirting around each other as though afraid to disrupt the tenuous peace they had managed to salvage. Elliot's emotions fluctuated between anger and sorrow, a pendulum swinging unpredictably as he tried to reconcile the life he thought he had with the reality he now faced. He spent hours replaying the confrontation, dissecting every word and gesture in search of meaning. Though Mara had admitted to forming an emotional connection with another man, her insistence that nothing physical had occurred left Elliot questioning whether he had been told the whole truth. It wasn't merely the betrayal itself that tormented him, but the uncertainty surrounding its extent. Work became his sanctuary. Throwing himself into his job offered Elliot a reprieve from the thoughts that consumed him at home. Yet even in the midst of meetings and deadlines, his mind would drift back to Mara's distant expression, the fractured foundation of their marriage an ever-present shadow over his days. At night, sleep eluded him as he lay awake, grappling with the enormity of what had been lost. Mara, too, was struggling in her own way. She carried the weight of her actions heavily, her remorse manifesting in quiet gestures. Preparing meals she knew Elliot liked, leaving notes of apology that he often left unread. She avoided her phone, the device that had once been her lifeline to the outside world, now a symbol of the choices that had brought them to this point. Though she wanted to explain herself further, to find the words that might offer clarity or closure, she hesitated. Each attempt at conversation seemed to die before it could take flight, leaving them both trapped in a cycle of avoidance. Elliot's moments of introspection led him to confront hard truths about their relationship. He realized how much he had taken for granted, the quiet moments of connection, the shared dreams that had once defined their union. He began to see the ways in which he had contributed to the distance between them, his focus on work and routine blinding him to Mara's growing unhappiness. These realizations, however, did little to ease the sting of her betrayal. Their uneasy truce was tested when a mutual friend, unaware of the turmoil in their marriage, invited them to a dinner party. The prospect of presenting a united front in public felt daunting, but neither wanted to reveal their struggles to others. On the night of the event, they dressed carefully, their outward appearances betraying none of the cracks beneath the surface. The evening passed uneventfully, their interactions polite but devoid of warmth. Yet the effort of maintaining the facade left them both emotionally drained. As weeks turned into months, Elliot and Mara began to tentatively explore the idea of therapy. At first, the sessions felt uncomfortable, the presence of a third party amplifying the rawness of their emotions. Yet over time, the process forced them to confront issues they had long ignored. Elliot spoke of his feelings of inadequacy, of how he had struggled to balance his responsibilities at work with his role as a husband. Mara, in turn, revealed the loneliness that had driven her to seek solace outside their marriage, her words tinged with regret and vulnerability. Though progress was slow, the sessions offered glimpses of hope. The counselor encouraged them to rebuild their communication, to share their thoughts openly without fear of judgment. For the first time in years, Elliot found himself listening to Mara in a way he hadn't before, his anger gradually giving way to a deeper understanding of her perspective. Similarly, Mara began to see the impact of her actions through Elliot's eyes, the pain she had caused him cutting deeper than she had anticipated. Yet even as they worked toward reconciliation, the road ahead remained fraught with challenges. Trust, once broken, proved difficult to mend. Elliot struggled with moments of suspicion, his mind often returning to the messages he had seen and the unanswered questions they raised. He found himself checking her phone when she wasn't looking, a behavior he despised but couldn't seem to stop. Mara, aware of his distrust, oscillated between patience and frustration, her guilt clashing with her desire to move forward. Their attempts to reconnect were marked by small victories and setbacks. An impromptu dinner at their favorite restaurant brought laughter that felt genuine, if fleeting. A weekend spent hiking rekindled memories of earlier, happier times. Yet these moments of closeness were often followed by periods of distance, the weight of their history pressing down on their efforts to heal. Elliot's family, though unaware of the specifics, sensed that something was amiss. His sister's concerned questions and his mother's worried glances only added to the pressure he felt to find resolution. Mara's friends, too, noticed her change in demeanor, their well-meaning advice often tinged with judgment. The external scrutiny, though subtle, became another layer of complexity in their already strained relationship. In quieter moments, Elliot found himself questioning whether forgiveness was truly possible. He had read stories of couples who had overcome infidelity, their bonds stronger for the trials they had endured. Yet he couldn't shake the fear that their efforts might ultimately prove futile, that the scars left by Mara's actions would never fully fade. Mara, meanwhile, wrestled with her own doubts. She questioned whether her attempts to make amends were enough, whether Elliot's lingering pain was a sign that their marriage was beyond repair. The emotional toll weighed heavily on her, manifesting in sleepless nights and moments of quiet despair. Yet she remained committed to the process, driven by a desire to rebuild what they had lost. As the months stretched on, the future of their marriage remained uncertain. The progress they had made in therapy was tangible but fragile, each step forward accompanied by the risk of falling back. Both Elliot and Mara knew that the path to healing would be long and arduous, requiring patience, honesty, and a willingness to confront their deepest fears. For now, they continued to navigate the complexities of their shared life, holding on to the hope that, despite everything, they might still find a way to move forward together. As the months turned into a year, the path toward resolution unfolded with the same uneven rhythm that had characterized their journey so far. Both Elliot and Mara had come to accept that their marriage, though scarred, still held a foundation worth preserving. What had once seemed impossible, rebuilding trust and intimacy, now felt like a challenge they were ready to face together. The progress was neither linear nor easy. Therapy continued to play a central role in their healing process, guiding them as they addressed lingering doubts and fears. The sessions became less about rehashing the past and more about understanding how to move forward. Their counselor encouraged them to create shared goals, small but meaningful steps that would bring them closer. They decided to dedicate one evening a week to spending uninterrupted time together, rediscovering the simple joys of each other's company. Elliot began to let go of his obsessive need for certainty. The constant questioning and covert checking of Mara's phone slowly gave way to a conscious decision to trust her again. He realized that while vigilance might offer a temporary sense of control, it ultimately hindered their progress. Mara, in turn, committed herself to transparency, sharing her thoughts and feelings more openly than she ever had before. She acknowledged that rebuilding trust required patience and consistency, and she was determined to prove her sincerity through actions rather than words. One of their first significant milestones came during a weekend trip to a nearby coastal town. It was a place they had visited during the early years of their relationship, a setting imbued with happy memories. The decision to return felt symbolic, a way to reconnect with the version of themselves that had once thrived. Walking along the shoreline, hand in hand, they talked about their hopes for the future, their voices mingling with the sound of crashing waves. For the first time in months, Elliot felt a sense of peace, the weight of the past momentarily lifting. Their journey toward resolution also required confronting the societal and familial pressures that had compounded their struggles. They decided to share their story with a select few friends and family members they trusted to provide support without judgment. Opening up about their experiences proved cathartic, creating a sense of community around their efforts to heal. It also allowed them to challenge the stigma surrounding marital difficulties, fostering an environment where vulnerability was met with compassion. As time went on, Elliot and Mara began to redefine what their relationship meant. They let go of the idealized version of marriage they had once clung to, embracing the imperfections that made their bond uniquely theirs. They discovered new ways to connect, exploring hobbies and interests they had previously neglected. Elliot joined Mara in her love for gardening, and she took an interest in his passion for photography. These shared experiences became a source of joy and renewal, moments of lightness that balanced the weight of their ongoing work. Forgiveness, though hard one, became a central theme of their reconciliation. Elliot learned to differentiate between forgiveness and forgetting, understanding that the pain of betrayal would not vanish, but could coexist with the desire to move forward. Mara, for her part, forgave herself for the choices she had made, recognizing that self-compassion was essential to their shared healing. Together, they reframed the narrative of their relationship, choosing to see the struggles they had endured as a testament to their resilience. One of the most transformative aspects of their journey was their renewed focus on communication. They established rituals that fostered openness, such as daily check-ins where they shared highlights and challenges from their day. These conversations, though simple, became a cornerstone of their relationship, reminding them of the importance of staying connected. They also learned to navigate conflicts with greater empathy, approaching disagreements as opportunities for growth rather than threats to their bond. Though their marriage had been irrevocably changed, Elliot and Mara found that change could be a source of strength rather than a sign of weakness. They had weathered a storm that might have destroyed others, emerging on the other side with a deeper understanding of themselves and each other. The scars left by their struggles served as reminders of their capacity to endure, a testament to the work they had put into rebuilding their relationship. The turning point came during their anniversary, a day that had once loomed as a painful reminder of what they had lost. Instead of dwelling on the past, they chose to celebrate the progress they had made. Over a quiet dinner at home, they exchanged heartfelt letters, each expressing gratitude for the other's commitment to their journey. Elliot's letter spoke of his admiration for Mara's strength and vulnerability, while hers acknowledged the depth of his forgiveness and his unwavering support. The exchange left them both teary-eyed, their connection feeling stronger than it had in years. Looking back on their journey, Elliot and Mara recognized that their marriage would never be the same as it once was, and that was okay. The version of their relationship they had rebuilt was not a return to what they had before but the creation of something new, shaped by the lessons they had learned. They knew there would be more challenges ahead, but they also knew they were better equipped to face them together. In the quiet moments of their life, a shared laugh over breakfast, a walk through their blossoming garden, a night spent reminiscing about the early days of their love, Elliot and Mara found a sense of fulfillment that had once seemed out of reach. Their story, though marked by pain and hardship, was ultimately one of hope and resilience. It was a reminder that even in the face of brokenness, there was the potential for renewal, a chance to create something beautiful from the fragments of what had been.
How was the video? Don't forget to like and subscribe for more. See you in the next video. Bye bye.